Let's get real. You're not here by accident. You're here because you've had enough. Enough of the games, enough of the lies, and enough of feeling like a pawn in his twisted little game of ego. You've chased, you've explained, you've bent over backward trying to make him see your worth. And what did he do? He ignored you, rejected you, or worse, kept you dangling like a puppet on a string. But let me tell you something, that ends today. You see, the problem isn't you. It was never you. The problem is that he built his ego on your reactions, your pain, and your need for validation. Every time you asked, "Why are you doing this to me?" or tried to prove you were enough, he felt like he'd won. Because for men like him, it's not about love. It's about control. But here's the twist he didn't see coming. You don't need to fight him. You don't need to argue, beg, or even tell him he's wrong. You're about to show him, without saying a word, that his ego is as fragile as the lies he built it on. This isn't about revenge. It's about power. Your power. You're done explaining yourself. You're done overthinking every text he didn't send and every promise he didn't keep. You're done chasing a man who doesn't deserve a second of your time. From this moment forward, you're not playing his game. In fact, you're flipping the board, walking away, and leaving him in the dust to figure out where he went wrong. And trust me, queens, he will wonder. Here's the brutal truth. His ego is only as strong as your attention. Every time you react, defend, or engage, you're feeding his sense of control. But when you stop, when you go silent, indifferent, and focus on your own rise, his world starts to crumble. He's left to sit with himself, to realize that he's not the puppet master he thought he was. And that silence, that's louder than any words you could ever say. Let's talk about Sarah. Sarah was stuck in the same cycle you're in. She gave him chance after chance, thinking she could fix him or make him see what he was throwing away. He kept her in limbo, stringing her along with breadcrumbs of attention, just enough to keep her hooked. But one day, Sarah had enough. She stopped chasing, stopped explaining, and stopped caring. She didn't tell him she was done. She showed him. She ignored his texts, deleted his number, and poured her energy into her own life. At first, he didn't notice, but when he realized she wasn't coming back, his ego started to crack. And by then, Sarah didn't care. She was too busy thriving. And that's where you're headed. In this video, I'm giving you the tools to do exactly what Sarah did. These aren't petty tricks or manipulative tactics. These are Stoic principles that will help you break his ego by reclaiming your dignity, your time, and your power. You won't need to say a word because your silence and actions will speak for themselves. So, if you're ready to stop explaining, stop chasing, and start living for yourself, hit that like button and subscribe for more unapologetic wisdom. Because today, we're not just breaking his ego, we're building you into the unstoppable force you were always meant to be. Now, here is your task. Affirm this with me, right here, right now. I am done explaining. I am done chasing. I am unstoppable, and my silence is my power. And don't keep it to yourself, queens. I want all of you to declare it out loud in the comments. Simply type, I am unstoppable. Don't just whisper it to yourself in the quiet of your room. Let it become your mantra. Let it fuel every step you take, every boundary you enforce, and every time you choose yourself over someone who didn't deserve you. Because this isn't just a statement, it's a decision, a declaration, and the beginning of your rise. Let's dive in. Number 1. Starve his ego with silence. Let his insecurity do the work. He expects you to break. He's counting on your weakness, on the part of you that's always given him the benefit of the doubt. Every time he left you hanging, every time he threw breadcrumbs your way, he relied on the fact that you'd come running, craving the attention he rationed out like scraps to a starving dog. But this time, you're starving him instead. Picture this. It's late at night, and his name lights up your phone. "Hey, you up?" The same lazy, non-committal message you've seen 100 times before. Normally, your heart would flutter. You'd overthink it, tell yourself, maybe this time it's different. But it's never different, is it? This time, though, you don't play along. You leave it on red. No response, no reaction, just silence. And that silence? It's louder than any paragraph you could write, any argument you could start, or any confession of hurt you could make. That silence is his undoing. Here's the thing about men like him. They thrive on control. And control comes from your reactions. Every time you engage, whether it's to fight, plead, or explain, you're feeding his ego, confirming that he still holds space in your mind. But silence? Silence is a vacuum, and nature hates a vacuum. When you stop engaging, he's left alone with his thoughts. And trust me, they're not as pretty as he likes to pretend. Imagine your silence as a mirror. When you stop filling the space with your words, he's forced to look at himself. No distractions, no excuses, just his reflection staring back at him. And what does he see? A man who thought he was untouchable, now scrambling to figure out why you're not playing the game anymore. Your silence isn't just a message, it's a confrontation. You might be asking yourself, what if he doesn't care? What if he just moves on? Let me answer that with a question. If he truly doesn't care, why are you wasting your time caring for him? And more importantly, why are you afraid of his indifference when his actions have already shown he's not invested? Silence doesn't just starve his ego, it clears the fog in your mind, the one that's kept you questioning your worth. When you stop talking, when you stop explaining, you start hearing the truth, that you deserve more than a man who only shows up when it's convenient for him. Here's a truth you need to face, as hard as it might be to swallow. He's not going to change because you argued harder, begged louder, or explained yourself more clearly. Change doesn't come from your words. It comes from his realization that he's losing something he thought he'd always have. And silence forces that realization. Think of a bonfire raging in the night. He's been the one throwing logs on it, keeping it alive with his inconsistent affection, his manipulative games, his half-hearted apologies. But the moment you stop adding fuel, the moment you go silent, the fire begins to die. He'll panic, try to rekindle it, but he'll find nothing left to burn. That's the power of silence. You might feel a pang of fear, a voice whispering, "What if he doesn't notice?" Or, "What if he replaces me?" That fear is his last grip on your mind. But let me remind you, silence isn't about making him notice. It's about you reclaiming your peace. And as for being replaced, no one who truly valued you would treat you like you were disposable. If he replaces you, it only proves he was never the man for you. Let him downgrade. You're walking away from the chaos he thrives in, toward a peace he'll never know. Picture this, a puppeteer standing on stage, strings in hand. He tugs, expecting the puppet to move, but it doesn't. He tugs again, harder this time. Still nothing. That's you, cutting the strings. The more you stay silent, the more powerless he becomes. He can't perform without your reactions, and without his performance, his ego crumbles. You might wonder, but isn't silence immature? Shouldn't I tell him how I feel, for closure? Let me tell you something. Closure is overrated. Closure is an excuse to stay in contact, to give him another opportunity to manipulate you. Real closure comes from you, not him. It's when you decide that your peace matters more than his understanding. Sarah, who's walked this path before, learned this the hard way. She spent months trying to explain, hoping he'd finally get it. But every time she reached out, every time she explained, he pulled further away. It wasn't until she went silent, blocked his number, stopped looking at his social media, stopped responding to his bait, that he started chasing her. But by then, she'd realized she didn't need his validation. Her silence wasn't just her power, it was her freedom. And now, it's your turn. You don't need to argue, explain, or justify. You don't need to answer his late-night texts or react to his breadcrumbs of attention. All you need to do is stop. Stop feeding his ego. Stop giving him your energy, and start building the life you deserve. Affirm this with me. I owe him no reply. My silence is my statement. Write it in the comments. Declare it to yourself, to the universe, to every moment you've ever wasted on a man who didn't see your worth. And let it echo in your actions, because your silence is the sound of your power. Number 2. Reclaim your worth. You're not his puppet. He thinks he's got you figured out. Every move you make, every reaction you give, feeds his illusion of control. To him, you're predictable. He cancels plans, and you're the one apologizing. He pulls away, and you chase harder. He dangles just enough attention to keep you hanging on, knowing you'll always be there, ready to dance to his tune. But what happens when the music stops? What happens when the puppet cuts the strings and refuses to play the game? That's when everything changes. Imagine this. You're a marionette on a stage, strings in his hands. With every pull, you respond. A text at midnight? You reply instantly. A half-hearted apology? You accept it, hoping it means things will get better. But here's the truth. The stage is his. The strings are his. And as long as you keep moving to his rhythm, he's the one in control. But here's the twist he never expected. You've been holding the scissors all along. The moment you decide to cut the strings, the moment you stop reacting, is the moment you reclaim your power. Let's talk about Sarah. Sarah, like you, was caught in the cycle. She thought if she gave enough, loved enough, forgave enough, he'd change. Every time he reached out, she was there. Every time he needed her, she dropped everything. But what about when she needed him? Silence, excuses, indifference. And yet she stayed, convinced she could fix him, until one day she didn't. That day wasn't marked by a dramatic confrontation or a tearful goodbye. No, it was quieter than that. She simply stopped. Stopped responding, stopped chasing, stopped giving him the power to dictate her life. At first, he didn't notice. He assumed she'd come running back, like always. But when the silence stretched on, when her absence became undeniable, he panicked. He called, texted, even showed up at her door. But Sarah didn't budge. She was done. And while he was left unraveling, wondering where he went wrong, Sarah was busy thriving. You might be thinking, but what if he doesn't notice? What if my silence doesn't matter to him? Let me ask you this. Does it matter? Reclaiming your worth isn't about him. It's about you. It's about deciding once and for all that your value isn't tied to his attention or approval. Whether he notices or not is irrelevant. What matters is that you notice, that you start living for yourself instead of dancing to his tune. Let's hit that fear hard. The fear that cutting him off will leave you empty, alone, or forgotten. The fear that if you don't chase him, no one else will. But let me remind you of something. The emptiness you feel isn't from losing him. It's from losing yourself. Every time you let him pull the strings, every time you let his crumbs of attention dictate your worth, you chipped away at your confidence, your peace, your power. Cutting the strings doesn't leave you empty. It sets you free. Picture this: a marionette on a dusty old stage. The strings are cut, and for the first time, it stands on its own. It's unsteady at first, unsure of how to move without someone pulling the strings. But then it takes a step, and another, until it's walking tall, proud, and free. That's you. The first steps after cutting him off will be hard. You'll feel the pull to reach out, to explain, to go back. But each time you resist, you grow stronger. Each time you choose yourself, you prove that you never needed him to stand tall. You might wonder, but what if he comes back? What if he apologizes and promises to change? Let me ask you this: how many promises has he already broken? How many times has he apologized, only to fall back into the same patterns? A man who truly values you doesn't need to be taught how to treat you. He doesn't need to be chased or begged to stay. And he certainly doesn't use your love as a leash to keep you under his control. Sarah didn't wait for him to change. She didn't give him the chance to pull her back into his game. She cut the strings and walked away, not to teach him a lesson, but because she finally understood her own worth. And that's your task now, not to punish him, but to free yourself. Say this with me: I am not a puppet. I cut the strings and reclaim my freedom. Write it in the comments, declare it boldly, and let it become your truth. Don't just say it, live it. In every decision you make, every time you choose silence over reaction, every time you prioritize your peace over his chaos, you're cutting the strings. And as you rise, stronger and freer than ever before, he'll see what he's lost. But by then, Queen, you'll be too far gone to care. Number 3, indifference, the kryptonite to his ego. He thrives on your reactions. Whether it's your anger, your sadness, or even your love, it's all fuel for his ego. To him, it doesn't matter if you're praising him or cursing his name. What matters is that you're paying attention. But what happens when you stop? What happens when he's met not with passion, not with pleading, but with silence and indifference? That's when his world starts to crumble. Because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. Picture this: he posts a carefully curated photo on social media. It's not for the world, it's for you. He's hoping you'll see it, maybe even hoping it'll hurt you. A subtle dig, a message meant to spark jealousy or regret. Normally you'd overanalyze it, maybe even react. But not this time. This time you scroll past it like it doesn't exist. No likes, no comments, not even a fleeting glance. And in that blank space where your attention used to be, that's where his confidence cracks. You see, men like him feed on your emotions. Positive or negative, it doesn't matter. Your anger? He twists it into proof that you still care. Your tears? Validation that he still has power over you. Even your love, pure, unwavering, becomes a tool he uses to boost his own ego. But your indifference? That's something he can't handle. Indifference is kryptonite to his ego because it strips him of the one thing he craves most: significance. Imagine a fading star, once bright and powerful, now dimming without the light of your attention. That's him. Without your reactions, without your energy, he's left floundering in the dark, unsure of his place in your life. And that uncertainty, that's where the real damage begins. You might be asking yourself, but what if he doesn't notice? What if he doesn't care? Let me tell you something. he'll notice. He's been keeping score this whole time, banking on the idea that you'll always react, always engage. The moment you stop, the moment you choose indifference, he'll feel it, and it'll sting in a way no argument or confrontation ever could. But here's the hard part. Staying indifferent requires strength. It means resisting the urge to engage, even when he baits you. It means letting his provocations slide, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. He'll test you, text you late at night, post things designed to get under your skin, maybe even try to provoke a fight. But each time you let it go, each time you choose silence over reaction, you're reclaiming a piece of your power. Let's be clear, indifference isn't about being cold or cruel. It's not about punishing him or playing games. It's about prioritizing your peace, your energy, and your time. It's about showing yourself and him that your life doesn't revolve around his actions, that you are untouchable, no longer swayed by his games or manipulations. Think of Sarah. She was the queen of overthinking, dissecting every text, every post, every word he said or didn't say. But when she finally embraced indifference, everything changed. He sent a long-winded message, accusing her of not caring. She didn't reply. He posted something on social media, clearly aimed at her. She didn't react. And as the days turned into weeks, his efforts became more frantic, more desperate. But by then, Sarah had moved on. She wasn't ignoring him to hurt him. She simply didn't care anymore. You might feel the pull to react, to defend yourself, to prove something. Resist it. Remember, your energy is precious, and he's not worth a drop of it. Let his messages go unanswered. Let his posts fade into irrelevance. Let his attempts to provoke you fall flat. Say this with me. I am untouchable. My indifference is my armor. Write it in the comments. Declare it to yourself and to the universe, and let it guide you, not just in this moment, but in every interaction going forward. Because indifference isn't just about him, it's about you. It's about choosing peace over chaos, strength over reaction, and self-respect over everything else. And as you rise unbothered and unstoppable, he'll be left in the dark, wondering how he lost the light that once revolved around him. Number 4. Build a life that outshines his absence. He thought you'd crumble without him. He thought you'd sit by your phone, waiting for his breadcrumbs, endlessly replaying every conversation in your mind, wondering what you did wrong. But here's the reality he never saw coming. Instead of breaking, you're building. You're building a life so full, so radiant, that his absence isn't just insignificant. It's the very thing that fueled your rise. Sarah was in that dark place once. He ghosted her after months of games, leaving her doubting everything about herself. At first, she let the pain consume her, replaying his words, hoping for closure that would never come. But one day, she woke up and realized something powerful. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need his validation. What she needed was herself. So, Sarah got to work. She joined a gym, not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted to feel strong again. She poured herself into a career, landing a promotion she'd been too distracted to chase before. She reconnected with friends, filled her weekends with laughter and adventure, and started that side hustle she'd always dreamed about. And then, one day, she posted a picture of herself at a rooftop brunch, confident, glowing, unstoppable. And him, he saw it. Lurking in the shadows, scrolling through her feed, he realized what he'd lost. But by the time he noticed, Sarah wasn't even thinking about him anymore. That's the power of building a life that outshines his absence. It's not about revenge. It's not about making him jealous. It's about you stepping into the version of yourself that you were too distracted to become when you were caught in his games. It's about filling your life with so much joy, purpose and fulfillment that his presence or absence becomes irrelevant. You might be asking yourself, but what if I'm not ready? What if I'm still hurting? Let me tell you this, you don't have to feel ready to start. The pain you feel right now, use it as fuel. Turn every tear, every doubt, every sleepless night into a stepping stone toward your future. Start small. Pick up that book you've been meaning to read. Sign up for that class you've been putting off. Take one step, then another, and soon you'll realize that every moment you invest in yourself is a moment you reclaim from him. Picture yourself as a phoenix. In the aftermath of his rejection, you're standing in the ashes, feeling broken and lost. But phoenixes don't stay down for long. They rise, stronger and more beautiful than ever, their flames brighter for having been through the fire. That's you. Every time you choose to invest in yourself, to focus on your growth, your happiness, your goals, you're rising higher. And with every step, his absence fades further into the background. You might wonder, what if he doesn't notice? What if he doesn't care? Let me be clear, this isn't about him. It's about you. But here's the thing, he will notice. Men like him always do. When the messages stop, when the late-night texts go unanswered, when your life begins to shine so brightly that he's blinded by it, he'll feel it. And by then, you won't care. Because your life, your happiness, won't be tied to his opinion anymore. This isn't about proving him wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about realizing that you don't need him or anyone else to validate your worth. Your success, your joy, your glow, it's yours, and it's unstoppable. So, Queen, say this with me. My success is my loudest response. Write it in the comments, shout it to the universe, and let it guide you. Don't just say it, live it. Build a life so full, so vibrant, that his absence becomes the smallest part of your story. Because when you rise like a phoenix, nothing and no one can hold you back. Number 5. Set unshakable boundaries. Demand respect without words. He's used to crossing lines, isn't he? Every excuse, every empty promise, every attempt to pull you back in. It's all designed to test how far he can go. And for too long, you've let it slide. You've justified it, rationalized it, told yourself, maybe this time he means it. But deep down, you know the truth. He doesn't respect you because you haven't demanded it. Not anymore. The power to change this dynamic isn't in what you say to him. It's in the boundaries you set and the silence you maintain when he tries to break them. Picture this. He calls late at night, asking to explain or to talk things out. His tone is soft, his words calculated, designed to pull at your heartstrings. Normally you'd answer, hoping for clarity or closure. But this time you don't. You see the call, you feel the familiar pull, but you let it ring. No explanations, no emotional replies. Just a firm line in the sand. That moment? That's where his power ends and yours begins. Setting boundaries doesn't require a grand speech or a dramatic exit. It's in the quiet, consistent enforcement of what you will and will not tolerate. When he texts you out of the blue after weeks of silence and you don't respond, that's a boundary. When he asks you to meet and you say no without explaining why, that's a boundary. Boundaries aren't just rules. They're a declaration of your worth. And the moment you enforce them, you send a message louder than words. I am not someone you can manipulate. I know what you're thinking. What if he doesn't respect my boundaries? What if he keeps trying? Let me tell you this, persistence isn't a sign of care. It's a sign of control. A man who truly respects you won't push against your boundaries. He'll honor them. And if he doesn't, that's all the clarity you need. Your job isn't to make him understand. It's to protect your peace, no matter how many times he tries to cross the line. Imagine your boundaries as a fortress. The walls are high, the gates are locked, and the foundation is unshakable. He can knock, he can shout, he can even try to climb, but he will not get in. Because this fortress isn't for him, it's for you. It's where your self-worth resides, safe from his games and manipulation. Boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about letting the right people in. The ones who see your value without needing to be convinced. The ones who respect your time, your energy, and your heart. And when you set those boundaries, you'll realize something incredible. The ones who don't respect them were never meant to stay. Say this with me. I set the rules, and my boundaries are non-negotiable. Write it in the comments, let it echo in your actions, and let it remind you of your power. Because the moment you enforce your boundaries, you stop being his option and start being your own priority. Number 6. Let time do the talking. He thought you'd always be there. He thought time was on his side, that no matter how many times he walked away, you'd still be waiting, frozen in place, ready to pick up where he left off. But what he didn't realize is that time is not his ally. It's yours. And while he's sitting there, waiting for the right moment to dangle another breadcrumb your way, you're out there rising, thriving, and proving that the best revenge isn't a scathing text or a dramatic confrontation. It's a life so well lived that he becomes irrelevant. Picture this. Sarah walked away from him months ago. No dramatic goodbyes, no final explanations. She simply stopped engaging. At first, he didn't notice. He assumed it was a phase, that she'd eventually reach out, just like she always did. But time kept moving, and Sarah didn't. She was too busy building the life she deserved. She started hitting the gym, pursuing her goals, and surrounding herself with people who genuinely valued her. And then one day, his name popped up on her phone. "I miss you." But Sarah didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any words could ever be. You might be wondering, what if he doesn't reach out? What if I never hear from him again? Let me ask you this. Does it matter? This isn't about waiting for him to realize your worth. This is about you realizing it first. His acknowledgement or regret doesn't define your value. Your actions do. Time isn't about revenge or making him suffer. It's about giving yourself the space to heal, grow, and become unstoppable. Think of yourself as the ocean, vast, deep, and infinite. He's a puddle, a small, stagnant thing, confined by its own boundaries. While he's stuck in place, replaying the same tired games, you're flowing freely, carving your own path, and washing away anything that no longer serves you. He'll see it eventually, the tidal wave of your growth. And when he does, it'll be too late. You might feel that pull, the fear that moving on means losing him forever. But ask yourself this. What are you really losing? A man who kept you guessing, who only gave you enough to keep you around? Or the version of yourself that stayed small to fit into his life? Time isn't your enemy. It's your greatest ally. With each day that passes, you'll see the truth more clearly. You don't need him. You never did. Say this with me. I don't chase. I rise and I thrive. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in. Let it fuel you. And let it guide you as you step into a life so full, so radiant, that his absence feels like nothing more than a whisper in the wind. Because while he's stuck wondering where you went, you'll be too busy living to care. Number 7. The final blow. Walk away without looking back. He never thought you'd leave. That's the cruel irony of it all. He played games, pushed your boundaries, and tested your patience because he believed you'd always be there. His ego convinced him that no matter what he did or didn't do, you'd stay. But the moment you decide to walk away, not with anger, not with tears, but with quiet, unshakable strength, is the moment his world begins to crumble. Walking away isn't about proving a point to him. It's about proving one to yourself. It's about choosing your dignity over his disrespect, your peace over his chaos, and your future over the dead weight of his presence. He thrives on your reactions, on your efforts to fight for him, on the belief that you'll always look back. So what happens when you don't? When you let go of the rope in the tug of war he's been playing with your heart? That's when the final blow lands, and trust me, Queen, it's one he'll never recover from. Imagine this. Sarah spent months caught in his cycle. Every time she tried to pull away, he'd throw her a lifeline, an apology, a promise to change, a moment of affection. And every time she'd take the bait, thinking, maybe this time will be different. But it never was. Until one day, Sarah decided she'd had enough. She didn't block him in a fit of rage. She didn't send a long emotional text. She simply stopped. Stopped answering. Stopped explaining. Stopped waiting for him to become the man she needed. At first, he didn't notice. He assumed she'd come back, just like she always had. But as the days turned into weeks and the silence grew deafening, he realized something he never expected. Sarah was gone. Not just physically, but emotionally. And that was the blow that shattered his ego. Because for a man like him, control is everything. And Sarah had taken it away without a single word. You might be thinking, what if he doesn't care? What if my leaving doesn't affect him? But let me tell you this, even if he pretends not to care, even if he acts indifferent, your absence will haunt him. Why? Because men like him don't expect to lose. They don't anticipate the moment when the woman they thought they could manipulate finally decides she's worth more than their games. And when that moment comes, it's not just his ego that breaks. It's the entire illusion of control he's built around himself. Think of yourself as a queen ascending her throne. The court jester, the man who thought he could keep you small, who tried to make you doubt your worth, is left behind in the dust. He watches as you rise, realizing too late that the one person who could have stood beside him is now untouchable. And that's the final blow, Queen. Not your anger, not your words, but your quiet, resolute decision to leave him behind and never look back. Walking away isn't easy. Let's be honest. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. You'll feel the pull to turn around, to reach out, to give him one last chance. You'll question yourself, wondering, am I making a mistake? What if he changes? But let me remind you of this. If he wanted to change, he would have already. And every time you've given him another chance, he's shown you exactly who he is. Here's the truth you need to face. Walking away isn't a loss. It's a victory. It's the moment you take back everything he tried to take from you, your confidence, your peace, your power. And yes, it'll hurt at first. You'll grieve the version of him you hoped he could be. But with each step forward, the pain will fade, replaced by the strength of knowing you made the right choice. Picture this. You're standing at a crossroads. Behind you is the life you've known, his games, his manipulation, the constant cycle of hope and disappointment. Ahead of you is the unknown, a path you've never walked before. It's scary, yes, but it's also full of possibility. And the only way to reach it is to take that first step and leave him behind. You might wonder, what if he comes back? What if he realizes what he's lost and tries to make things right? Let me ask you this. How many times has he come back before? And how many times has he truly changed? A man who values you doesn't wait until you're gone to start treating you right. He doesn't risk losing you to figure out your worth. If he's only chasing you because you've walked away, then he's chasing control, not love. Sarah faced the same dilemma. When she walked away, he didn't let her go quietly. He called, texted, showed up, even tried to guilt her into coming back. But Sarah stayed firm. She knew that going back would only lead to the same cycle, the same pain. And as hard as it was, she kept moving forward. Over time, the calls stopped, the texts faded, and Sarah realized something incredible. She didn't miss him. What she missed was the idea of him, the fantasy she'd created in her mind. But the reality, she was better off without it. Walking away isn't about teaching him a lesson. It's about teaching yourself one. It's about realizing that you don't need his validation to be whole, that your worth isn't tied to his approval, and that the life you deserve starts the moment you choose to let go. So here's your task, queens. Say this with me. I don't look back. My future is too bright. Write it in the comments, declare it boldly, and let it sink into your soul. This isn't just a mantra, it's a decision, a commitment to yourself. Don't let his games keep you stuck in the past. Walk away with your head held high and step into the life you were always meant to live. The final blow isn't about him, it's about you reclaiming your power. And trust me, queens, you're unstoppable. And so, queens, the time has come to reclaim what's yours, your power, your peace, and your future. Walking away isn't just a step. It's a declaration that you're done settling, done explaining, and done chasing. Let his ego shatter in the silence of your strength as you rise higher than he ever imagined. Now, take that step forward without looking back and watch as your life transforms. If this resonated with you, hit like, share this with a fellow queen who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom to fuel your unstoppable journey.